continue. I did eat my French fries. It's very hot in my living room, but let's close the door. It's 11 p.m. soon. Let's close for tonight. This is like 26 degrees. There, but it feels much hotter. Yes, so let's find this old slot 1. The last video was the slot 370. That's the old Pentium 3 I got the list of the Intel processors open. I like to look, I should not close it. Let's drag it. This list of Intel processors. I like to look at this and try to remember some of the numbers. But I have like 30 PDF open. Yes, this is the copper mine for slot 370. The Pentium 3 copper mine, this one. Yes, the Pentium 3, but the first Pentium 3 have the slot 1. That's the one I'm going to read about here. The slot 1. That's the first Katmai 250 nanometers, 9.5 million transistors from 450 to 600 megahertz. Nova Pentium 2. No, there's another one there. No, that's Celeron. There's old Celeron there, slot 1. 266 megahertz, 300. I don't have this anyway, 66 megahertz bus. And then another better version of the Celeron. Oh, that's Pentium 2, so the slot 1, that's more to the Pentium 2. And the first Pentium 3 have the slot 1. Then the Pentium 2, and that must be the first ever Celeron. So I need to have a computer like that. I need to look for Pentium 2 computers. Dodge's Pentium 2. Could be this one, 242 pin slot 1. Could be this, so that's the Pentium 2 computers. Yes, but it's 11 p.m. But I'm happy about I did start again to read about it. Let's write it down on my paper. Slot 1 Intel. Good. So we just continue tomorrow. I think I will take this, put my alarm clock on. I have to check my cell phone. 82 power on my cell phone. So let's read this. I have 2 Danish videos on like half an hour. I was eating this French fries, but I can put it public when we finish this video. Let's read this. So that's for the Pentium 2. Read to enter documents.
Slot 1. Slot 1 Asus P3C 2000. Slot 1-8626.jpg. Type slot chip form factors single edge contact cartridge, Pentium 2. Single edge contact cartridge 2, Pentium 2 Pentium 3. Single edge processor package, Celeron. Contacts 242, 1. FSP protocol to and FSP frequency 66, 100, and, on third-party chipsets, 133 ms voltage range 1.3 to 3.50 processors Pentium 2, 233 415 Celeron, 266 433 ms Pentium 3, 451.133 GHz. A socket makes following socket 370 CPUs usable Celeron and Pentium 3 to 1,400 MHz via Cyrix 3, 350 733 MHz via C3, 733 1200 ms. Sockets also made it possible to use some Pentium Procpus 4 socket 8 using the same method. Predecessor socket 7, successor socket 370. Slot 1 refers to the physical and electrical specification for the connector used by some of Intel's microprocessors, including the Pentium Pro, Celeron Pentium 2 and the Pentium 3. Both single and dual processor configurations were implemented. Intel reverted to the traditional socket interface with socket 370 in 1999. Contents. General. Form factors. History. Chipsets and officially supported CPUs. 4, 5. Intel 440FX, 6. Intel 440LX, 7. Intel 440X, 8. Intel 440BX, 9. Intel 440ZX. Intel 810. Intel 820/820E, Camino. Intel 840. Via Apollo Pro /Pro 2 /Pro Plus. Via Apollo Pro 133. Via Apollo Pro 1330. SIS 5600, SIS 600. SIS 620. See also. References. External links. General. With the introduction of the Pentium 2 CPU, the need for greater access for testing had made the transition from socket to slot necessary. Previously with the Pentium Pro, Intel had combined processor and cache dies in the same socket 8 package. These were connected by a full. This article is part of the CPU socket series. Pentium 2 SECC form installed into slot 1 speed bus, resulting in significant performance benefits. Unfortunately, this method required that the two components be bonded together early in the production process before testing was possible. As a result, a single, tiny flaw in either D made it necessary to discard the entire assembly, causing low production yield and high cost. Intel subsequently designed a circuit board where the CPU and cache remained closely integrated, but were mounted on a printed circuit board, called a single-edged contact cartridge, SECC. The CPU and cache could be tested separately, before final assembly into a package, reducing cost and making the CPU more attractive to markets other than that of high-end servers. These cards could also be easily plugged into a slot 1, thereby eliminating the chance for pins of a typical CPU to be bent or broken when installing in a socket. The form factor used for slot 1 was a 5-inch long 242 contact edge connector named SC242. To prevent a cartridge from being inserted the wrong way, the slot was keyed to allow installation in only one direction. The SC242 was later used for AMD's slotter as well, and while the two slots were identical mechanically, they were electrically incompatible. To discourage slotter users from trying to install a slot 1 CPU, the connector was rotated 180 degrees on slotter motherboards. With the new slot 1, Intel added support for symmetric multiprocessing, SMP. A maximum of 2 Pentium 2 or Pentium 3 CPUs can be used in a dual-slot motherboard. The Celeron does not have official SMP support. There are also converter cards, known as slockets, which hold a socket 8 so that a Pentium Pro CPU can be used with slot 1 motherboards. 2. These specific converters, however, are rare. Another kind of slocket allows using a socket 370 CPU in a slot 1. Many of these latter devices are equipped with their own voltage regulator modules, in order to supply the new CPU with a lower core voltage, which the motherboard would not otherwise allow. Form factors. Intel Pentium 2 CPU in SECC form factor. The single-edge contact cartridge, or SECC, was used at the beginning of the slot 1 era for Pentium 2 CPUs. Inside the cartridge, the CPU itself is enclosed in a hybrid plastic and metal case. The back of the housing is plastic and has several markings on it: the name, Pentium 2, the Intel logo, a hologram, and the model number. The front consists of a black anodized aluminum plate, which is used to hold the CPU cooler. The SECC form is very solid, because the CPU itself is resting safely inside the case. As compared to socket-based CPUs, there are no pins that can be bent, and the CPU is less likely to be damaged by improper installation of a cooler. Following SECC, the SEP form, single-edge processor package, appeared on the market. It was designed for lower-priced Celeron CPUs. This form lacks a case entirely, consisting solely of the printed circuit board holding the components. Pentium 3, CATMAI, in SECC2, CPU at center, 2 chips at right arc acceleron in SEP, CPU at center, under heat spreader, surrounding chips are resistors and bypass capacitors. A form factor called SECC2 was used for late Pentium 2 and Pentium 3 CPUs for slot 1, which was created to accommodate a switch to flip chip packaging. 3. Only the front plate was scoured over. The coolers were now mounted straight to the PC band exposed CPU die and are, as such, incompatible with SEC cartridges. History. Historically, there are 3 platforms for the Intel P6 CPUs, Socket 8, Slot 1 and Socket 370. Slot 1 is a successor to Socket 8. While the Socket 8 CPUs, Pentium Pro, directly had the L2 cache embedded into the CPU, it is located, outside of the core, on a circuit board shared with the core itself. The exception is later Slot 1 CPUs with the copper minor core, which have the L2 cache embedded into the die. In the beginning of 2000, while the Pentium 3 PUS with FCPGA housing appeared, Slot 1 was slowly succeeded by Socket 370, after Intel had already offered Socket 370 and Slot 1 at the same time since the beginning of 1999. Socket 370 was initially made for the low-cost Celeron processors, while Slot 1 was thought of as a platform for the expensive Pentium 2 and early Pentium II models. Cache and core were both embedded into the die. Slot 1 also obsolete the old socket 7, at least regarding Intel, as the standard platform for the home user. After superseding the Intel 5P Pentium MMX CPU, Intel completely left the socket 7 market. Chipsets and officially supported CPUs 4, 5. Slot 1 / socket 370 converter Intel 440FX 6. Introduced in the 6th of May 1996. FSB 66 MHz. PIO / WDMA. Supported RAM type EDO DRAM. Supported CPUs Pentium Pro. Pentium 2 with 66 MHz FSB. Celeron, Covington, Mendocino. Used in both socket 8, Pentium Pro, and slot 1, Pentium 2, early Celerons. Does not support AGP or SDRAM. Allowed up to 2 CPUs for SMP. Intel 440LX 7. Introduced in the 27th of August 1997. Slot 1 / socket 8 converter FSB 66 MHz. Supported RAM type EDO DRAM, SDRAM. Supported CPUs Pentium 2, Celeron. AGP2 mode. ADMA / 33 Pentium 2 with 66 MHz FSB. Celeron, Covington, Mendocino. Introduced support for AGP and SDRAM. Allowed up to 2 CPUs for SMP. Intel 440X 8. Introduced in April 1998. FSB 66 MHz. Supported RAM type EDO DRAM, SDRAM. Supported CPUs Pentium 2, Celeron. AGP2 mode. ADMA / 33 Pentium 2 with 66 MHz FSB. Celeron, Covington, Mendocino. Same specifications as 440LX, but memory support limited to 256 MB and no SMP support. Intel 440BX 9. Introduced in April 1998. FSB 66 and 100 MHz. Some motherboards supported overclocking to 133 MHz, allowing usage of socket 370 CPUs using a socket. AGP2 mode, max memory mapping 32 or 64 MB. ADMA / 33. Supported RAM types, SDRAM, PC66 and PC100, PC133 with overclocking, up to 4 DIMMs of 256 MB. Supported CPUs Pentium 2 with 66 and 100 MHz FSB.
Yes, I need to go to bathroom.